Welcome, everybody, to the Out of Home Insider Show, a podcast like no other, hosted by the one and only Tim Rowe. Get ready to have some knowledge dropped on you and to be entertained, because nothing's more valuable than food for your brain. So sit back, relax, we're about to dive in as the best industry podcast is about to begin.
And then, like, dang, I wish I'd started pressing record a while back.
Yeah, for sure.
They're usually like soft intros anyway. But how did you get into all this?
To Comb specifically, or into like
out of home?
Out of home, it's a weird story. So like, I graduated high school when I was 16. I went to college immediately for computer programming and systems analysis. But at the same time, I was a fashion model. So I was traveling like around the world, internationally, blah, blah, blah. And I got to see a really cool side of the advertising space, like how campaigns are created. And so that really intrigued me. And I decided to go back to school for a bachelor's degree in marketing, media, and communications. And so I did that when I was 18, and I graduated when I was almost 21. And then I was still modeling, and then I opened my own agency that was like artist representation. So I wrapped photographers and models and placed them overseas, and like stylists, really cool space. And then I ended up having brain surgery.
Wow.
So I closed my agency and decided I needed something a little more stable than like my own business. So I got my first like gig in the advertising space, on a contract gig with Poets Media, which is a big sort of traditional media platform in the Canadian space. You know, it's print newspapers at the time. They had a little bit of a digital presence, but not much. And my role was like innovations and tech. So it was like, you know, bringing in augmented reality into like print production. So I kind of fell in love with like that whole disrupting the traditional space. And then I left that contract. I did PR for a famous fashion designer who dresses like Angelina Jolie and a bunch of stuff. And I hated that. So I was like, okay, I don't want to do this. And I found my way to Titan Outdoor, which at the time was global. They had a UK inventory. They had tons of US inventory and Canadian inventory. And I started there as their director of marketing and quickly took over their IT infrastructure because they didn't have anybody in Canada handling that. And then about 6 months into that role, Titan decided to sell the Canadian assets of the company. And they were acquired by a private equity firm, and the 10% portion of the Canadian general manager of Titan at the time. And so that formed a new startup in the out-of-home space, acquiring those assets. And I did all of the full like end-to-end brand development, literally designed the logo, created everything from scratch, and also at the same time built their IT infrastructure, broke them off of the parent company, did all of their data integrity migrations. We did a fully customized instance of Salesforce. So end-to-end, it ran everything from lead gen to sales cycle, profitability, production, installation, real estate management. So anything that like hit government relations or installation, construction management of new assets, right through to finance. It was like a huge product.
Wow.
And so that took about like 2.5 years to like really flush out and build. And then when we were done that, it was only me. And then I got to hire like one marketing person and one IT person to help during that transition. And then once we had completed that, I moved to more focusing on like how to integrate new technology. So this at the time was now like 8 years ago. And so we were the first in Canada to launch like a mobile and static out of home murals, specifically cross media integration. So we were like geofencing static murals, and then we would retarget the mobile via mobile in-app and native. And then that company was acquired by Bell Media, which is big. And then I moved to a pure play digital out of home company, which was basically like just rinse and repeat. I did all of the same things over again. But here I actually got more into like the consumer analytics side. We built a first to market, we called it an audience intelligence platform, which basically was a direct competitor to Comb, because Comb was like not doing anything relevant at the time. So we just said, screw it, we're just going to do our own thing. So we partnered with cellular carriers, this company called Celent. We ingested their data from Rogers Direct. So we ingested CRM and tower data. And then we parsed that with mobile application data and road segmentation data. So everything was directional. We knew traffic flow information. And so we made a huge fuss in the marketplace when we publicly launched that. And I think it was like 10 months later, we were acquired by Outfront. And then I stayed at Outfront for a year and a bit, required amount of time, let's say, as an executive in their tech and marketing department. So I ran all things marketing. I had creative, full marketing team across Canada, sales, digital ad ops, and development that reported into me, creative as well. And I quit and went into executive consulting for blockchain and machine learning because I wanted to change things up entirely. And that was really cool. We built, I worked, the company that we formed was called Centris. So it was an executive consulting firm that's basically, we took we would partner with both like Fortune 500 companies. We did a ton of work with Deloitte and a few others, but our bread and butter from a financial standpoint, outside of Deloitte acquiring a bunch of our products, was the startup space. So we would partner with like a bunch of cool, new, hip blockchain and Web 3.0 AI machine learning companies that basically just didn't know how to make a business. They had a great idea. They were looking for funding. And we would take a small equity stake in their company. So less than 15% equity stake for a certain investment amount. And then we would insert ourselves in as the executive team for a period of time to build the company up until such time we felt it was appropriate for us to leave. And then we still maintain that ownership stake.
Wow.
It was a really cool business model because we got to we built in 6 months, we built for one company a fully decentralized cryptocurrency marketplace and tokenization exchange, a suite of crypto wallets. And it was just like, it was acquired by some global blockchain company I'd never heard of, but I was like, this is cool. And then during that time, I was also a consultant, an advisor, and a board member for this really cool out-of-home company, disruptive out-of-home company called Frontrunner Technologies. I'm still an advisor and a shareholder in. And they approached me when I was at Centris, more for like the data and analytics side of things. They didn't really understand how to apply data to their very fluid inventory. And so their business model was a bridge of prop tech versus ad tech. So they partnered with major commercial brokerage firms across North America. So JLL, Cushman Wakefield, CBRE, like all of the big ones. And they would gain access to the vacant street level storefronts. So unoccupied spaces. And we created a proprietary tech to deploy and turn the glass window fronts into real-time content and advertising. So now imagine during a pandemic, they're doing quite well because there's a ton of vacant inventory everywhere.
Sure.
Yeah, literally everywhere.
So smart.
And then while I was doing that, the board of Comb in June of last year approached me and said, hey, the current president is retiring. Would you be interested in this? And my first reaction was no. Dinosaur. Thank you, but no. And anyways, there was a back and forth courtship of about 6+ months at least, where they were trying to convince me that they wanted change within the organization. And I was kind of saying like, how much change are you ready for? Because like, I'm not somebody who's going to sit stagnant and you want me to commit to a certain amount of time and blah, 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 blah. Anyways, here I am. We've worked it out.
Here we are.
Yeah. It's been surprisingly fun so far.
So you touched on something that it seems kind of reminiscent of a moment in time that Out of Home is going through just over the last couple of weeks here, where you were someplace that Comb was supposed to solve for a certain thing, right? And then you built a competing solution for that to just outmaneuver them because it was slow and a dinosaur not moving fast enough.
Yep.
How do you interpret then, like, some of the changes that are coming out. OAAA is talking about the opportunity to see. It seems like there's a bit of a global initiative to align out of home measurement. Based on your experience, you've seen it from both sides, and obviously now you're leading COMB through this development. How do you think that this all shakes out? What should we be paying attention to as an industry?
The US is really interesting. And I say that with all kindness to my cohorts, Anna and Kim. I know them both very, very well. I think that there probably needs to be more collaboration between the two. It seems to be very competitive. And I'm not here to say who's the one driving the competition, or because I wouldn't know. But it definitely seems to be very political and very competitive. And it's kind of like a race to like fame almost. Like I was the one who did this versus that collaboration of like, this is going to drive the industry forward.
Right.
It's very different in the Canadian space. Like our members, and maybe it's because we're both marketing and measurement at COMB.
Talk to me about the structure of COMB, maybe how it's different than just a Geopath or an OAAA. Like what is the unique value that COMB brings?
Yeah, so COMB is pretty much take Geopath and OAAA and put them into one organization, and that's what we do. We do both measurement and marketing. The best part about combining the two and having them under one sort of umbrella is that they do really go hand in hand. The advancements in measurement require advancements in marketing, and vice versa. The advancements in marketing require advancements in measurement. So if you're standalone organizations and you have no control over one or the other, it's very difficult to, as an industry, push that forward and drive that holistic voice. Like here in Canada, we've got the ability to contact Forbes and curate articles with Forbes to talk about all of the measurement initiatives that we're doing. That helps on our marketing side. Whereas it's a bit of a different beast. The measurement organization isn't really meant to be doing marketing. So they're just meant to like push out the measurement and communicate that and educate that. But on the flip side, the OAAA also has to market and educate in the same capacity or in a different capacity to try to drive revenues and increase the piece of the pie, basically. So it's really two separate bodies, whereas here it's much easier to have that holistic collaboration because we are one in the same doing both. We have two separate departments, obviously, that handle both, but they're constantly talking. We're launching some really cool new initiatives for COVID specifically. Because here we're constantly under lockdown.
Yeah, right. While things are opening up here domestically, things are still a little bit tight there. So how has COVID changed the way that COMB interacts with its members? How has it changed maybe the direction of COMB? Talk to me a little bit about what the last year has looked like and maybe something you learned along the way that you never thought you'd learn.
COVID has been very challenging for sure. One of the things that, coming in, at the end of 2020, like I joined in November, I couldn't really do much until January. I saw very quickly the need for relevant data and insights, and we didn't have that readily available. So it was one of the first initiatives that I had sort of embarked upon in saying, hey, board members, we need to put out some compelling insights. We need to ensure that, we've got granular information that's not just at a specific market level, but it's at a product level and a road segment level. So we understand the variance between, West End Toronto versus East End Toronto, or this CMA versus another CMA, highway boards versus in-town versus rural boards of the same product type. So that was the first initiative. We're launching that at the end of May. We'll be reporting all of Q1 and all of April, and then we'll do rolling monthly insights. So that's been a big initiative. The one thing I've learned is there's like a terrible misconception of the advertising, the buy side, let's say. So I don't know if it's at the agency level or if it's at the brand level specifically, but there seems to be like this misconception that, okay, all of Ontario's in this stay-at-home order and no one's out because they're maybe living in the suburbs and They're not seeing the movement of urban downtown. I live right downtown Toronto, and it's a disaster. Like, it's a mess. There's traffic everywhere.
Right, you're in the office today.
Everywhere. I'm here today, and I can look outside. There's a construction site right beside me. There's a grocery store that's packed. In my house, my condo, there's a park like at my doorstep that is just rammed with people all day long. There's a skating rink. It's a roller skating during the summer and a splash pad, and a hockey rink in the winter. It's been rammed. Like, people are out. It's just this misconception of how people are out. There's like a perception that no one's leaving their home unless they're going to get groceries. So I'm only going to advertise in grocery stores, which is totally not the case.
So then from the marketing side, putting a marketing cap on, which I'm sure never comes off, what specifically can Canadian operators be doing differently to maybe dispel a little bit of that? And I don't think that that's too different than what we're seeing here in the States. Is folks think that people aren't back to work, they're not driving on the roads, or like, people didn't just disappear. They're still there. What can be done from a marketing standpoint, maybe from the local and from the corporate level, that you think should be done differently?
I think there just needs to be really consistent communication, because there's fragmented communication in the sense of, like, there's a report here, there's an article here. There also needs to be a really strong communications strategy behind it. Like, specifically in the Canadian marketplace, Comb gets a lot of traction from our local media outlets. So we've got these great outlets, I should say, Media in Canada, Daily Do, that constantly pick up our content. But that's not really telling the broader story. And that's really speaking mostly to the agencies, the big brand directs, the CMOs, the directors of the brands that are actually the decision makers, aren't really paying attention to that. So the content strategy has to be definitely multifaceted in the sense that you're touching on local, regional, and national and international outlets, which is why we've done a huge job. My new VP Marcoms has done a great job in terms of getting us a voice in content. Like, eMarketer was our co-moderator on our Comb Talks event last week, which was our first one. And just like really pushing the envelope to getting us in these like major international outlets to speak about how out of home is still relevant. I wrote a piece for Forbes that launched last month. No, it launched this month. It launched early this month. Early May.
This month, yep.
Yeah. And it was talking about, the relevance of static in the digital era, which I think is something that we all need to be aware of. It's not just about digital out of home and programmatic digital out of home, which I'm a huge advocate for, but static plays a large part in that sort of intrinsic ecosystem of out of home. And the buzzwords for sure right now, particularly during a pandemic, for convenience and ease of campaign adjustments, let's say, programmatic is certainly key, and it's going to be a key driver in our return. But I think we can't lose sight of static. And I think we'll see a resurgence of large format static, in my opinion, like the big, impactful, classic out of home in the coming years.
Right, because it's the static that makes the digital worth looking at. Like, if everything is just a screen that's turning, that's very like Blade Runner, that's very futuristic. Right? And then everything just becomes noise. And there's nothing more beautiful than great static execution. There's just so much you can do with the context of that.
Absolutely.
Right. And that's exciting. And especially now, I think, as we come into a period where we're seeing a lot of brands get involved with out of home that haven't traditionally used out of home. And for creative marketers, it's the ultimate canvas, right? Like, if you had fun doing display ads, wait till you get your hands on a billboard, right? Like, there's so much more you can do. Do you think that the industry does enough to talk to creatives and really demonstrate the value of the format?
No. The focus of media owners, not to a fault, is obviously on sales. Like, it's revenue generation and ensuring, the viability of their successful business. With that, certainly they're speaking to creative agencies, and there are some strategies for creative agency tours to present out of home as a format. best practices for design, whether it's static or digital design, colors that work on digital that work on static that don't work on digital, that type of thing. But I don't think that it's not a key driving training educational component. It is something that, Comb will take on more as like part of the marketing side of things with respect to best practices and some of the educational components that we're working on. But I definitely think that there's great opportunity for communicating the value of creative, because oftentimes like clients are repurposing creative from online or from a print ad or from their TV spot. And they're hoping it's going to look good in a phone. Like the TV spot doesn't have sound, so maybe you lose some of the context. Or your print ad only works on a vertical screen or poster. It doesn't work on a horizontal. So there's a lot of different nuances with that, I think.
Yeah, right. And kind of pulling away from the data. We've become so data and measurement focused, and it's easy to get excited about those things because they're tangible, right? I can see a metric. I can see a chart that goes up and to the right. And sometimes it's hard to get excited about the things you can't measure and just trusting your gut and getting back to like just being a good marketer, like trusting your instincts to do good marketing, and then using the data and measurement piece to maybe construct a feedback loop around something that you haven't traditionally had a feedback loop to measure versus comparing it to some sort of online advertising or something like that. It'll be interesting to see maybe some exciting new ideas and executions. I'm looking forward to this summer because I got to imagine there's a lot of brands with some pent up dollars to spend and some fun ideas after being trapped inside.
There was a good article that said like the spring and summer is going to be the new holiday season because of
I dig that. As we're both wearing hoodies and like I can look outside, it's 75 and sunny. But
I wear hoodies all the time.
Same.
Like staple for me.
What about does Comb do big conferences? Obviously OAAA, Geopath have their annual conference. Is that something that y'all do already? Is it something to look forward to in the future?
I mean, again, like historically Comb hadn't done much marketing wise. But it is something we're definitely doing. We're not planning like a massive conference, particularly during the virtual space, let's say. So we launched Comb Talks last Tuesday. So that's going to be a quarterly virtual panel event. And it's a bit different than your traditional panel event because it's actually fueled by survey data. So we push out survey data prior to these events on the specific topic that we're looking to speak about. So in the case of our last panel, it was brand direct. So we pushed out a survey to the top 100 spenders in out of home. And we gauged the sentiment of how do you feel about out of home during the pandemic? Are you using it, not using it? What would you change from the sales side in order to encourage you to leverage out of home more during these times? Like, how do you feel about the flexibility? We asked literally everything our sales side wanted to ask a brand direct, but couldn't because they're dealing with an agency, let's say. So we push that out as a neutral body in a survey, and then we tailor our panel conversations surrounding those insights. And then our follow-up Q&A for our newsletter at the end of May will touch on some of the questions we didn't speak about. On the panel, we'll recap some certain questions, and then we'll also include additional brands in the Q&A to have a bit more of a voice. And we've solicited more questions from the sales side about, how things that they would want to ask, but don't typically have the opportunity to ask. And so that's kind of the trend for Comb Talks is every one of our quarterly, call it panel or virtual events, we're going to curate survey content to drive the conversation versus just having sort of a hot topic conversation. And then we're toying with the idea, we're not set on it yet, but we're toying with the idea of like a bi-weekly fireside chat on a podcast kind of format where we just kind of like sit down. I mean, we're having conversations like this every day. So why can't I post this in a podcast,
Press record. That's it. Just press record and put it on YouTube.
Right. So we're toying with the concept of doing that under the Comb Talks umbrella. And we've got WOO. Do you know the World Out of Home organization?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I sit on their global associations and their research. They're doing a global initiative for like standardization in research and methodology, similar to what the OAAA just put out, but globally, where the key associations that are working on measurements actually have the voice in here's what should be this sort of standard approach to how you look at different data sets. We're not saying this is the preferred data set. We're saying if you use this data set, maybe you should look at these checklist of things. And they're coming to Toronto in 2022, hopefully in person. They were supposed to be here this year in person, but had to push again until 2022 due to COVID. So we're working with them on that conference specifically. I don't know that we'll host like major events. I find sometimes like when you do too many events, you get lost in the crowd. And so even our last event, we didn't even announce it until a week before because I wanted it to be more organic and like a pop-up kind of thing. And in a week we had 211 registered and like 190 showed up for it.
Wow. I mean, everyone wishes they could get like a show rate like that. That's awesome.
It was huge. And I mean, I'm sure it has something to do with the fact that like Comb's never done this before. So it's like, oh, I want to see what they're actually doing.
Sure.
But it was one of those things where I'm like, oh, okay, maybe this like over marketing an event like is too much and we should just roll with this pop-up kind of theory, but we'll see how it progresses. We definitely have like aggressive marketing plans.
I like aggressive marketing plans.
Yeah.
Are the Comb Talks, is it exclusive to Comb members? Are these publicly available? Now, where can folks go to find that?
It's on our website, just comb.ca/talks. And
we'll link out to it below because that's a great resource. Because that is such a hot button topic, right? Is
huge.
Agency direct, right? Like I have opinions from probably all of the sides, right? What was the surprising takeaway from that you saw?
It was a really good conversation, I would say. It was very organic. I mean, even though we had questions that like we curated based off of the survey content, you know, Paul, who was my eMarketer, he's the chief analyst for eMarketer Canada, Insider Intelligence. And he and I were sort of like messaging back and forth. I'm like, okay, we organically answered this question, skip to this one, you go to this question. So it was a very fluid conversation. I would say, you know, the key takeaways, there was a lot of talk about creative in that panel discussion, like a lot of talk about creative. So we were, you know, when we spoke with TELUS, they touched on how TELUS uses their critters. They're very animal centric. And everyone visually knows when it's a TELUS ad because it's so minimalistic. It's this dark white background with this big, bold, colorful critter of any species and a very cheeky tagline. One of the things I really respected from what he was saying specifically was about his focus on community during COVID. So they took the critters to the community, as he said, and they were really focused on, you know, how to encourage that community messaging. So they took more of that localized approach, and then their more national, like large impact was on just like brand recognition kind of thing, which I thought was really interesting. So they combined like the media formats. And then the other interesting component I would say came from Noah from Ace Hill, which is a beverage company, alcoholic beverage company. And it was a cool dynamic because we had Rogers and TELUS as these like large corporations. And then we had Noah from Ace Hill as more of an independent, smaller scale up. I wouldn't call him a startup at this point. It's done very, very well. But he has an affinity to static versus digital. So there was a good organic conversation. We got into talks about digital, programmatic, out of home, and you know, transitioned into digital, or to Noah with static. And again, brand creative came up. He was talking about how they leverage sort of their minimalist brand, and it's very high impact. Just a photo of the can, and it has this very recognizable A logo. So quite interesting.
it's cool to hear that, right from the brand direct. With that buy side, sell side relationship, how do you envision, obviously, I don't know if we'll ever get to a place where everyone's just happy with each other, but I know it's a frustration for any agency to have the media company going direct. Hey, you were on my billboard. I can get you better rates. There's certainly intrinsic value that agencies bring to this. What's the right mix? Like how do we get everybody to play nice together in the sandbox? And if not everybody, at least most of everybody, or if that's not possible, that's okay too.
I think it's education, like really a strong voice in the marketplace, educating to the value of out of home at the various different sort of touch points. Again, it has to be done locally, regionally, and nationally, as well as internationally. There's got to be a really strong voice in the marketplace that has the ability to compel both brand direct and major agencies to listen to what is being sort of positioned and to fuel that desire to be inquisitive and ask questions about, oh, okay, well, I didn't realize this. Let me come to you and get some more insights. Let's talk about this. Let's talk about, these 4 points that you posted in this particular content piece. So I really think it's truly going to be about education and communication. I'm respectful of the agency relationship. Absolutely. The reason we went brand direct was we truly wanted to hear from the brands, and we were actually hearing quite consistent feedback that the agencies were putting out of home on plans, and it was going to the brand direct, and it would get cut off the plan. So that's why we actually decided to say, well, let's talk to the brands specifically and understand, like, are you actually using out of home, or is everyone just cutting out of home off the plans because you think that no one's outside of their house right now? So again, I think it's about insightful research and really compelling thought leadership from a communications and marketing perspective.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. My man Doug Cordova from Rapify is probably over there like fist pumping because it's a big pain point. He and I we've talked about it on the podcast. We talk about it offline. Sometimes there's agencies that just want to be difficult and not present things to the client, but like the value of the agency is that is just that you get to present all the things and, hey, client, pick what you want, right? Like, but I'm not going to be the one who doesn't show you a thing. And then you get a call and ask me, why didn't you ever show me the thing? Because it's really interesting and I want to do it, right? Like you have complete, like, I don't know what the right word is. There's a word, somebody go back and put the word in, but you can be that degree of separation as the agency where you're not the proponent of it. You're not fighting against it. You just get to show the client all the cool things they can play with.
Yeah, you have like full autonomy to give them the options. Basically, it's like, here's a buffet of options and here's my recommendation, which is fantastic. But sometimes, if the correct education and the correct information isn't readily available, these planners are so busy. They're constantly shifting campaigns, especially during the pandemic. So we, as the out-of-home industry, from a media owner side and from a marketing perspective under Comb, we've got to do our job to really educate and provide compelling insights, pieces, whether it's articles or just content clips that are really putting out the right information so that they have access to this. Because if they don't have that readily available, then it's unfortunately not going to be added into their plans due to the fact that they're so busy.
I couldn't agree more. And it obviously sounds like you're doing a lot of that great work. Where else can folks get in touch with you? Where do they find you? How do they learn more about you and Comb?
Me personally, I'm most active on LinkedIn, so you can hit me up there. I do have an Instagram and Twitter, but I'm not overly active on that. Although
we'll point them to the LinkedIn.
Yeah, my comms team is constantly trying to get me on there more. Point them to the LinkedIn for sure. I'm definitely most active on LinkedIn. Comb is also most active on LinkedIn, but we just launched our Instagram accounts, and kudos to my marketing team, Hannah, Lara, and Mo for getting that set up, and also for just like getting the Comb Talks thing organized, because that was a wicked endeavor for sure.
Yeah, that's huge. I'm excited to go back and listen to that conversation for sure. And definitely looking forward to the ones
They
that you're
did it in
doing.
such a short period of time too. Like I can't even understand how they pulled that off. But again, kudos to them.
Hannah,
Yeah,
Laura,
like,
and Mo,
hit us up-
this one's for you.
Yeah. Hit us up on LinkedIn. Obviously, our website, comb with 2ms.ca. If you want to check out Comb Talks, it's comb with 2ms.ca/talks. Definitely plenty of content on there. And I think that's the easiest way.
Cool. Well, Amanda, really, really appreciate you being here. We'll have to do it again sometime soon, and hopefully in person we can get everybody together.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, hey, if you found this helpful, please share it with somebody else who could benefit. As always, make sure to smash that subscribe button down below. See y'all next time.
Quarter century, I finally came to my senses. I finally got my hand up on the tinted Benz, kid. I see the world clear through my tinted lenses. With the dream and the drive, the possibilities endless. Now print that, send this all the way to Tokyo. Take a trip down south, down to Mexico.